What's going on in real estate? Well, there are some very interesting things going on, particularly in Ontario. But let's hop across. All right, things in BC, little bit like Ontario. We'll cover that in a minute. Alberta, stuff just sells. That's it. Stuff just sells. The prices are up in Calgary. They may start to bump into some sort of natural ceiling, but yeah, sales are fine there. Rest of the prairie is fine. Ontario. Come back to that. Real estate sales in Quebec, steady. In fact, they were a little bit up in the Montreal area. We must understand that Quebec is its own story. Quebec has a much more muted, much lower immigration capacity than Ontario and the rest of Canada. And so they form their own world. And when, people buy in a kind of a more natural, normal state in Montreal and in Quebec City. Prices are still very reasonable in Quebec City, and many of the places outside of Montreal very reasonable. Very reasonable. I mean, there's a bunch of people in Quebec saying, "Hell no, not reasonable. I think they're crazy high." But but compared to Ontario and British Columbia, pretty reasonable. All right, pretty reasonable. All right, let's take a look at what's kind of the most interesting developments in the last few weeks in the Ontario real estate sector, and some of that overlaps into British Columbia. So what are we seeing is the buildup of inventory. In other words, there's more listings. Listings in those two provinces, listings is sometimes very skinny. In other words, people just don't offer the houses for sale. We've seen a lot of growth in listings, particularly in Ontario, in a very specific segment in the condo market. Now, there's good reason why there should be more action in the condo market, even though, again, this is way up. Listings are way up compared with some points in the past. And yet condos are becoming the bulk of the market in some regions. I mean, that's just what's available. That's just what people buy and sell. That's just what the inventory is in a lot of places, in particularly old 416. So what's going on? Inventory building. What's it mean? Touched on it before. There is some general concerns in the micro condo. We'll call it, I'm going to go back to using my favorite phrase, the dog crate condo. It's a dog crate, okay? It's sub 500 square feet. In some cases, it's 385 square feet, some of these. 385 square feet. God, that's awful. Anyway, these are all investor-driven products. These are all owned by people who don't actually live in them. Maybe a couple, but vastly more people who are just investors renting them out. A little bit of speculation in that. Airbnb. So what's happened? The tightening up of different kinds of things like Airbnb, almost impossible in BC right now. Getting under a lot of pressure in the Toronto particularly. So people, and capital gains, inclusion bump makes people think, well, time to sell. So we see some inventory growing, steadily growing in that area of small condos and also other condos. Single family listings are up too. I mean, the sales are still at 10-year lows. Now, remember, whenever I talk about 10-year lows in Ontario, we've got to be very, very conscious of the important fact there's so many more friggin' people in Ontario than there was 10 years ago. Oh, man, is there ever. Jesus, lots more. So 10-year level, sort of decade low sales is actually really bad. Okay, it's very sluggish. So what's it all mean? Clearly, rates have not fallen dramatically. Therefore, we must understand that in extremely expensive housing markets like British Columbia, but particularly Ontario, it's just very, very rate sensitive. That's the truth. It's just rate sensitive. We've got to accept it. Okay. And rates have just been bouncing around, not so hot. So there's clearly the story of great cuts by the Bank of Canada in early 2024 didn't happen. They did not happen. And I, as much as people like to pretend I said they would happen, they didn't happen. So what can we expect from this? All right, let's break it down. People like to say, okay, well, as soon as the rates drop, everybody will jump in because there's just a million people on the sidelines waiting to jump in. Are there? I don't know that. I don't necessarily know that. Yes, there's some because sales are very low. New builds are like in low rise don't exist. And yes, there could absolutely be people willing to jump in. Are there really this huge numbers of corporations, huge corporations willing to leap in and buy up all those condos? I think the firm answer in Canada is no. No, that does not exist, really. It's kind of an urban legend. That's not really true. What we have to know is this. Commercial real estate, and this in terms of the sale of land, when you're talking about, hey, we're buying this as land to be changed into something else. Land sales, when they do occur, they're basically 40% off their highs. That's the truth. In Toronto area, when you sell a piece of land to say, okay, this is development land, it's just a parking lot now, and you're going to turn it into something, those prices are down 40%. That's real money. That's a big goddamn difference. So will that seep over into residential? I'm not guaranteeing that, but I'm not even saying anything like it will happen because we have this difficulty with building low-rise properties. So we just don't have any new stock. But something's happening. We're going to know a lot more soon. Hang in. The story of house sales and home sales and condo sales in Canada, I think the real truth is just going to be written soon.